The moment the old woman stepped through the glass doors of the Elysian grill, the room shifted. Nadia Osei noticed it first, that cold, collective pause that moves through a crowd when someone doesn't fit the picture. The woman was elderly, somewhere in her late 70s, wearing a faded beige coat and carrying a plastic shopping bag that looked like it had survived several rough years. Her shoes were sensible but worn. Her hair was white and simply pinned. She moved slowly, carefully, with the kind of dignity that belongs to people who have long stopped needing anyone's approval. Nadia was clearing table 6 when she watched the maitre d', a slick man named Patrick with the kind of smile that only appeared for certain customers, intercept the woman before she could take another step. "Ma'am," he said, loudly enough for the nearest tables to hear, "I'm afraid this establishment operates by reservation only." "I have one," the woman said quietly. Patrick looked her up and down with eyes that had already made their judgment. "Under what name?" "Adiz," she said, "table for one." Patrick tapped his tablet theatrically, scrolled, then shook his head. "I'm not seeing anything. Perhaps you have the wrong restaurant." "I made it online 3 days ago." "Then I'm sure there was some kind of error on your end." A man at a nearby table chuckled. A woman in pearls leaned toward her companion and whispered something, and they both laughed without trying to hide it. Nadia stood very still, her cloth pressed against the table she'd stopped wiping, watching Patrick's face for a flicker of shame. She found nothing. "If you'd like," Patrick continued, his voice raising for effect, "there are some more affordable options on Clement Street. A diner, I believe, more suitable." The old woman, Adiz, said nothing. She simply looked at him. And in that silence, Nadia felt something move inside her chest, something hot and certain. She crossed the floor before she had finished thinking about it. "Ma'am," Nadia said, appearing at Adiz's side, "I'm so sorry about the confusion. We had a system glitch this morning. Several reservations weren't showing properly." She glanced at Patrick with a steadiness she'd been saving for a moment exactly like this. "I'll seat her myself." Patrick's eyes narrowed. "Nadia." "Table 9 is open," she said. "Follow me, please." Adiz looked at her for a moment, really looked at her, and then nodded. They walked together toward the quieter end of the room, past the whispers, past the pearls, past all the faces that had already decided who this woman was and what she deserved. Nadia pulled out the chair and settled Adiz at a table with a window view overlooking the courtyard. "You didn't have to do that," Adiz said softly. "Yes, I did," Nadia said. "Can I bring you some water? The lamb here is actually very good today if you'd like a recommendation." Adiz smiled. It was a slow, full smile, the kind that rearranged a face entirely. "I'd like that very much." Nadia served her herself. When the bill came, she paid for it out of her own purse, quietly, before Adiz could see it. It was almost half her lunch shift's earnings. She didn't think twice about it. Before Adiz left, she took Nadia's hand in both of hers. "You're a good woman," she said. "What's your name?" "Nadia Osei." Adiz held her gaze. "I won't forget it." Nadia smiled and walked her to the door. Patrick fired her 40 minutes later. If you're new here, welcome. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because we drop stories like this every week. And if you're already part of this community, drop a comment right now telling us, would you have done what Nadia did? Let us know and keep watching because this story is far from over. The next 3 days were brutal. Nadia had a 7-year-old daughter, Temi, whose school fees were due in 2 weeks. She had a landlord who had already extended grace twice. She had a mother with high blood pressure in a 2-bedroom apartment in the old part of Bridgecroft who didn't know how tight things were, because Nadia had never wanted her to worry. She sent out 14 applications. She got back 3 automated rejections and 11 silences. On the 4th morning, she was at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that had gone cold, her laptop open, when her phone rang. The number was one she didn't recognize, with a city area code. Miss Osai, the voice was professional, measured. My name is Clara Minsa. I'm calling from Alderton Group headquarters. We'd like to invite you for a meeting this Thursday at 10 in the morning. Mr. Victor Alderton would like to speak with you personally. Nadia stared at the wall. I'm sorry, she said. The Alderton Group. Yes, ma'am. I haven't applied to the Alderton Group. There was a brief pause. That's correct, you haven't, but I assure you the invitation is genuine. We'll send a car if you'd like. Nadia said yes, before she fully understood what she was agreeing to. She spent the next 2 days in a low-grade state of bewilderment. The Alderton Group was not the kind of company that appeared in most people's lives. Victor Alderton was one of the most recognized business names in the country. His photograph had been on magazine covers. His foundation had built hospitals. His company employed thousands. He did not call waitresses who had just been fired from restaurants. And yet, on Thursday morning, Nadia dressed in the best outfit she owned, left Temmie with her mother, and got into the car that had appeared exactly on time outside her apartment building. She'd expected glass and intimidation. The Alderton headquarters was both and neither: towering ceilings, quiet staff, a lobby that felt deliberate rather than showy. She was taken directly to the 43rd floor. The doors of the conference room opened, and 2 people were seated at the long table. One of them was a man in a charcoal suit, with a face she recognized from 10,000 headlines. The other was an elderly woman in a beige coat, her white hair simply pinned, her hands folded on the table in front of her. Nadia stopped walking. "Hello, Nadia," Adiz said, and she smiled that same slow, full smile. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Nadia gripped the back of the nearest chair and made herself breathe. "I don't understand," she whispered. Victor Alderton rose from his seat. "Please sit down, Miss Osai." His voice was quiet, not unkind. "My mother has told me a great deal about you." "Your mother?" Nadia repeated. Adiz nodded gently. "She goes out like that sometimes," Victor said. "Ordinary clothes, no driver, no announcement. She says it's the only way to see how the world really behaves, to find out what people are like when they think it doesn't matter." Nadia looked at Adiz. Adiz looked back at her without apology. "You paid for my meal," the older woman said softly. "You just been fired, and you paid for my meal." "I didn't know." "That's exactly the point." The silence in the room was full and warm. Nadia felt something unwinding in her chest that she hadn't realized was wound tight. Then Victor spoke again. "I want to tell you what happened after you left the restaurant that afternoon." He folded his hands on the table. "Our security team reviewed the footage. The incident was on camera: the maitre d's behavior, the mockery from the other guests, and the moment you crossed the floor to intervene." He paused. "That footage was shared internally within my senior leadership team." "And then," Adiz added quietly, "it was shared more widely than we intended." Victor nodded. "It became public. The restaurant has been the subject of significant media attention in the past 72 hours. The management has issued a public apology and launched what they're calling an internal review." Nadia had not watched the news. She had been too busy applying for jobs and keeping her daughter fed. "Patrick," Victor continued, "the maitre d' who fired you had applied last month, before any of this happened, for a senior operations role at our hospitality division. He reached the final round." Victor paused. "The final interview was scheduled for this Monday. My mother asked to sit in on it." Nadia looked at Adiz. "He didn't recognize me," the older woman said simply. "Not at first. I'm not sure he ever did, actually. I sat across from him for 40 minutes. "He didn't get the job," Victor said. And that was all that needed to be said about that. Nadia exhaled slowly. Then carefully she asked, "Why am I here, Mr. Alderton? I mean, beyond this. Is this just so I know what happened?" Victor leaned forward. "No," he said. You're here because I want to offer you a position. We are launching a community empowerment initiative next quarter, a foundation specifically designed to support women navigating financial hardship, single-parent households, and unjust workplace treatment. We need someone to lead outreach and operations. He held her gaze. Someone who understands that kind of life from the inside. Someone who acts with integrity when there's nothing to gain from it. The world had gone very quiet. I'm a waitress, Nadia said. You were a waitress, Victor said. Before that you were a woman who stepped into a room full of people who were laughing and said, "This is wrong." That's a rarer skill than most of my board members have. Adiz reached across the table and covered Nadia's hand with her own. You don't have to answer today. Take the time you need, Victor added. But I want you to know that this offer has nothing to do with charity and everything to do with character. You earned this by being exactly who you are. Nadia looked at this woman who had walked into a restaurant in a faded coat to find out what the world was made of. She thought of Temi. She thought of her mother. She thought of the table she had led a stranger to because the alternative was to do nothing, and doing nothing had never once felt like an option. I don't need more time, Nadia said. Her voice was steady. Yes, I accept. 3 months later, Nadia Osei stood on a stage at the Alderton Foundation's launch event, in a room of 500 people, beside Victor and Adiz Alderton. She wasn't a speaker on the program. She hadn't expected to be. Victor introduced her simply. This is the woman who showed us what this foundation is for, he said. She didn't change the world that afternoon. She just treated one person like she mattered. And as it turns out, that's where everything begins. The applause was long. Adiz, seated in the front row, caught Nadia's eye and smiled. Nadia smiled back. Because in the end, she hadn't done it for a reward, or a room full of applause, or a billionaire's attention. She had done it because an old woman was being treated like she was invisible, and invisibility is something Nadia Os had never been willing to allow, not for anyone else, and not anymore for herself. That's where we'll leave Nadia's story today. If this moved you, hit that like button. It genuinely helps more people find stories like this one. Subscribe if you haven't already and drop a comment below. What would you have done in Nadia's place? Would you have stepped in or would you have looked away? There's no wrong answer, only honest ones. We'll see you in the next story.